Welcome to Edge of Intelligence. I'm your host, Carl Owen, a fractional CIO and AI strategy advisor at Protelligent. Today's guest is Dr. Logan Nye, physician, computer scientist, and founder of Galen Health, a mission-driven startup creating conversational AI agents to improve early detection and treatment of rare diseases and cancer. Logan also has a master's in computer science from Carnegie Mellon University and recently joined the Techstars AI Health Baltimore cohort. Logan, welcome to Edge of Intelligence.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. Logan, you started your medical journey aiming at orthopedics, then pivoted into AI and computer science. Can you tell us about that shift and what led to founding Galen Health?
Yeah, it kind of comes back to why I wanted to go to medical school in the first place. So we can start there. I wanted to become a doctor so I could do good in the world. That was my motivation for becoming a surgeon. I knew that doctors were a great source of good and really helped other people, and I figured that that'd be a noble career to aspire for. And so I went to medical school and decided that I really liked orthopedics. I was a typical jock doc and in all the typical ways. I played college sports, I loved weightlifting, orthopedic surgery seemed like the natural fit. But during a research experience after graduating from medical school, I went out to Harvard Medical School to do a research experience in clinical AI. I spent a year learning how to build computer vision models for medical imaging, doing things like fracture detection, and even looking into orthopedic oncology as well, so detecting different sarcomas, building models for digital pathology, and kind of got bit by the bug. And I realized that AI was getting good enough now that if I learned how to build it the right way, I could have that same impact, that desired outcome of doing good in the world, but not just one patient at a time. I could do it at scale because code by nature is infinitely scalable. It's this really power lever to magnify your impact. And so I sort of acted on a whim and decided to go back to school to learn how to do things the right way at Carnegie Mellon University and get a master's in computer science. So it's a bit of a I guess you could say, going out on a limb, exploring a new field. It's not very well defined yet in medicine, but I think that it's going to be a really impactful way for those in healthcare to make an impact at scale if we do it right.
I agree with you. Well, Galen offers conversational AI aimed at rare diseases and cancer. What's the core problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so we actually learned about this problem that we're solving by talking to enough oncologists and asking them what their workflows are like. And we landed on something called a tumor board. A tumor board is this weekly meeting at hospitals where different medical specialties come together to discuss cancer patients. And these meetings are multidisciplinary by nature. They have surgeons and radiologists and pathologists and all this data that comes into the discussion. And the goal is to figure out how to best help cancer patients. And it was this great opportunity that's both a challenge, a pain point that needed addressed. That is the clunkiness around the workflows of tumor board meetings, and also this opportunity to leverage AI to really magnify our ability to make good decisions. The entire purpose of a tumor board meeting is to make data-driven decisions and use as much brain power as we can to help these patients when they need us. And so I figured that that's a worthwhile problem to work on.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you describe your work as the fusion of medicine and machine intelligence. How does combining your medical background and computer science training unlock new capabilities?
Yeah, this is an insight that I had during that research year out in Boston. As I was learning how to build AI, I realized that I was able to iterate very quickly on building useful applications simply because I had the medical background to know what to build in the first place. And there's often this divide between our domain experts, that is those in healthcare in my example, and those who build the tools, so the computer scientists, the engineers, and so on. And the domain experts know what should be built but they don't know exactly what's available to them or how to build it and how to go about it. And then you have the opposite problem with the engineers. They can build these really powerful systems, but they don't know what exactly the question is that they're supposed to be answering in the first place. But if you straddle the two fields, then you have both the clinical insight to know this is a task that's done on a routine basis in healthcare, or something that is a current challenge to do without having the right tools, like discerning between different types of cancer under the microscope. And you also know what machine learning modalities are available so that you can quickly throw together an AI model and train it in the course of an afternoon. And so it's this having insight into both domains really accelerates the impact that you can have. You can get things prototyped and validated much quicker than you typically can.
So who are your primary users? Patients, clinicians, researchers? And how have you validated their needs?
Our primary users today are clinicians. So we build specifically for those who participate in these tumor board meetings. That would be radiation oncologists, radiologists, surgeons, clinical oncologists, and so on. Because they are the ones who are experiencing this pain point of having to prepare for these meetings. Preparing for a tumor board meeting is really data intensive, and everything's done manually right now. And this is a great opportunity for AI to streamline the workflow and increase the throughput of patients who can be discussed by the tumor board team and reap the benefits.
Okay. What early feedback or insights have surprised you the most, especially related to trust, usability, or clinical engagement? I mean, I recently took a class at MIT around healthcare and AI, or AI in healthcare. Yeah. And one of the challenges they always talked about was the biases that are inherent in training the models, and just the trust factor of the clinicians, using those models, and the concern that they may have. So, I'm really curious if there were any insights that you have that might have surprised you around adoption or the trust of the model, or any of those kind of things.
I don't think it's so much a surprising fact, but just something that was more confirmed than anything. It makes sense that people would be skeptical of AI, right? You need to be able, it's a bit of a black box still. And so clinicians don't like anything that they can't very mechanistically point to explanations for. It's a very conservative field by nature because we're taking care of somebody's life. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. But I've learned that the quickest way to adoption, or the quickest way to soothe soothe those concerns, is to address things that aren't directly involved in clinical decision making, like automation. Clinicians are very skeptical still of letting AI make informed decisions for their patients' well-being, but they are chomping at the bit for anything that will help streamline the documentation or the administrative pain points that they have. And so if you tell somebody, we actually started with a different idea for early detection in pancreatic cancer. That was our very first idea that we worked on, which is a great idea, right? It will be really useful. But nobody wanted to trust it because they said that's too high risk of a situation. But if you could just do something to help with the documentation, we would gladly pay money for this. And so that was an insight that was we caught on to early on, and has only been echoed by everybody that we've talked to. If you can do something that gets rid of the lower hanging fruit and the lower cognitive burden tasks first, then that builds up trust over time.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Your prototype uses fine-tuned LLMs on biomedical dialogue and rare disease data. How mature is that pipeline?
We have a functional system that we're implementing with the Mayo Clinic right now. And so it is still in its early days of R&D and iterating on the product, but it is functional, and we're getting ready to deploy it in academic medical centers across the country within the year.
Oh, wow. What's the ingestion process for new data? Is it research papers, literature, clinical findings, and how automated is it?
Yeah, so this is the main pain point that we're addressing, is actually this ingestion process. To give you an idea of what we're trying to automate with AI, the process, I'll tell you what the process normally looks like. At a tumor board meeting, typically 10 patients will be discussed by the team, one after another. And in order to discuss these patients, you need all of their medical records, all their health data. Everything has to be gathered into one spot. This gathering process is currently done manually, and so it takes 2 or 3 hours per patient on a weekly basis. So it really adds up. So what our platform does is it automates that process of scanning all the electronic health records, all the siloed databases across the healthcare system for that patient's data, and then uses AI agents, agentic capabilities to click through the electronic health record, grab all the information, bring it back, and then synthesize it into essentially like a short case presentation for the team. And so that includes things like their clinical notes, all their medical imaging. If they have histopathology slides on file, we gather that, their genetics and genomics data, everything.
You're building vertical AI agents for cancer care. What's your approach? Is it RAG architectures, retrieval augmented models, symbolic reasoning?
A little bit of both. So for things like clinical guidelines or other just fact-based repositories, we use RAG. But for decision engines and things that we'll be developing for clinical decision support and for actual diagnostics down the line, it'll be symbolic reasoning. It'll be a graph-based RAG approach that just tends to be the most robust representation for reasoning like a clinician does.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about, and I mentioned this earlier, but the biases that are inherent in some of the data in training these models. How do you guys get around that, and how do you address that?
You know, that's a good question. We haven't gotten to a point where we really had to address it quite yet, but that's going to be something where we lean on the clinical expertise of the teams that we work with. To be honest, that's just going to be something that we feel out with time, and as it arises, we'll learn how to tweak those biases and address them accordingly.
Understand. What are your biggest technical challenges? Is it model accuracy? You know, some of these things tend to hallucinate if you're using generative AI models, data drift, compute limits. I mean, there's a whole host of things that could cause some technical challenges for you.
Believe it or not, the most technically challenging part that we run into is just working with the healthcare system, like their IT infrastructure, because so much of the way that medical records or electronic health record systems are built is restrictive or requires like admin level permissions and so on. Navigating that in an automated fashion so that it can just operate by itself without us having to sit by and troubleshoot things tends to be pretty tricky. So that's something that people have struggled with historically, but now that we have agentic capabilities, we're able to create some workarounds for it.
Any challenges or issues with HIPAA or anything like that?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's something that you can work with the healthcare system directly to address. They're very cognizant of it, and obviously we're cognizant of it. So we just make sure that all all personal health information is redacted or stripped away before we feed it to these machine learning models.
Yeah, I was going to kind of jump into that next a little bit around the whole data process, the data cleaning process, and preparing it to train the models or fine tune the models. I'm sure there's still some manual processes as it relates to that, either data labeling or prompt engineering or different things like that. Can you kind of walk us through what the process looks like and tell us a little bit about what is still manual, what you've been able to automate, and what's good and what's bad as it relates to that?
Yeah, this is where LLMs have been really good for us. If you are clever in the way that you can craft a prompt, like prompt engineering for a system message for LLMs, you can kind of coach it to a way that it consistently gets rid of all the personal health information, is able to strip out. It knows what you're looking for in terms of de-identifying this patient health information. And so that's been really powerful for us, is using these LLMs and their ability to go off and execute tasks if you just prompt them the right way. And just repeating that process. So that's been how we've addressed automation so far.
Well, I know I've worked in the dental space a fair amount. I know it's not the same thing, but dental space is probably, 5 to 10 years behind the medical field. But one of the things that's pretty obvious is that from practice to practice or doctor to doctor even, the processes are not the same. The way they document things is not the same. So it presents huge challenges from a data perspective. So, and there's typically not a lot of data governance within a practice. That's just not something that's thought about because that's not really important. How do you guys work around that? So how do you manage the whole data governance, privacy, and compliance stuff as it relates to the medical knowledge?
So in the medical field, the electronic health record has a lot of hangups, but this is one of the areas where it actually helps to have an electronic health record in place. The large incumbent in healthcare is Epic Systems, and so especially at academic medical centers where we tend to work with, everybody uses Epic, and so that creates a sort of standardized way to approach this problem for us. It's from one institution to another. The workflows change a little bit, but the way that health is stored or healthcare data is stored is by and large pretty consistent. And so we can use agentic capabilities to kind of make the edges that aren't quite aligned line up, but the way that we retrieve health information from within the electronic health record is actually pretty standard for us.
Okay. Do you face challenges scaling compute, cost, or reproducibility of the data or anything?
Let's see. Not yet. We haven't gotten to that point yet. Because we largely build in cloud infrastructure, and so that scales pretty easily. It can expand and contract according to the needs that we have. But I suspect that as we get into more and more healthcare systems, that'll be something that we have to address. Tumor boards also by nature are pretty. They go in batches. They happen at discrete time intervals, and they happen once a week, pretty predictably. And so it isn't like we have to worry about this large surge of traffic or compute that comes in randomly. It's pretty predictable.
Gotcha. Well, AI is changing. What you learn today is out of date tomorrow, right? There's like 16,000 plus models out there. So, there's always challenges around that. So with the rapid pace of change in AI, how are you balancing that change with the rigorous standards of clinical safety and accuracy?
Clinical safety and accuracy. I think that the change tends to be in the positive. Like anytime there's change, it tends to be like an upward swing, and so it makes the standards. It just makes it so we can adhere better to like higher standards of accuracy and privacy adhering techniques. The biggest challenge with how quickly the space moves is just staying on top of everything, like you said. Trying to read research papers every morning or stay on top of the news. I was just reading a post today about the new Grok models, a new update to the large language models that are apparently pretty good that dropped today. And so we have to stay current on all what's available because it might open up new opportunities for what can be done for these cancer patients, care teams, and so on. So that's the most challenging part. It's just trying to stay on top of all this information. But I wouldn't say that it ever becomes a problem with the ability to maintain standards in healthcare. Healthcare standards tend to move a lot behind the curve quite a bit. And so the field progresses very rapidly, whereas healthcare infrastructure and healthcare policy moves very slowly.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, your career is really fascinating to me. What's been the biggest learning curve for you in building a scalable AI health product?
Let's see, the biggest learning curve. In launching a business, there's been a learning curve, and then in building AI, there's been a learning curve. I feel like it's constantly just challenging what I know and like what I need to study further. But with launching a business, the biggest learning curve has been learning how to discern what pain points exist and where a sizable market is, like trying to operationalize not just a practical problem in terms of I can solve this healthcare problem, but what can you do in a way that's self-sustaining and how can you build a business around it? That was something that took a little bit of time for me to learn as somebody who was going from healthcare to computer science and then trying to learn about business. It's been a crash course in business operations and trying to find product market fit. So that was pretty challenging for me personally. But in terms of AI, the biggest learning curve for me was after going through medical school. I hadn't touched calculus or physics in a decade, and then I said, I can probably learn how to code. I can write a little bit of Python, and I went to grad school at Carnegie Mellon and just got drugged through the dirt by math and physics. So it was a pretty rude awakening that you had to like get into the math again for the first time in a while. So that was a wake up call for me.
Well, one of the things I'm always intrigued about is, the adoption of AI. And I think when we first spoke, when you and I first spoke, one of the things that we talked about was there's a lot of people that understand they need to do something as it relates to AI, but they're not really sure what that is, right? They can spell it, and that's about it. They know the person down the street's doing something, they need to go do it. Obviously now it's beginning to get some traction in the medical field as well. One of the things that's really interesting to me, and it kind of started when I took that MIT class, was around the patient trust for some of these systems. And I know your main use case is with the practitioner, but what's your thinking about patient trust when you're designing these conversational AI agents? What ethical or user experience principles are you using or thinking about to guide those decisions?
That's a good question. From what I understand, the way that AI is going to be, by and large, handled is going to be like consent to use AI in a patient's care is going to be lumped into this intake process. Typically, when you go to the doctor, you have to sign all these waivers, and everything's based in good faith and knowing that the doctor's trying to take care of you, right? They're trying to act in your best interest. That's going to include AI in the future. And so I think that is going to be the way that they address that from a legal standpoint. On the individual basis, how patients are going to trust AI, I think that patient trust is going to increase over time. And the reason I say that is because so many people are interacting with AI in a very casual way now, like through ChatGPT and other everyday tools, that they're going to gain exposure to what it can do, what it can't do, and how good it's getting, how quickly. People are already using large language models as a form of therapist or a collaborator, a work partner and colleague, and so on. And so I think that trend is going to continue and strengthen in terms of how people treat it for care as well. I know a lot of people that have already gone to AI for information about their own personal health, and have even learned things about their health that maybe was never addressed in the past by a clinician. And so I think that trust is going to increase over time.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, you guys are doing some groundbreaking stuff. I mean, it's very innovative, groundbreaking, and I applaud you guys for that. As you continue to evolve the product, are there specific data sets or partnerships you're looking for to improve on the coverage or model performance? Yeah,
so this actually is one of the larger reasons why we're so excited about working on these tumor board meetings. We, in the long term, we would like to contribute to AI for precision oncology, which means tailoring cancer care decisions down to the level of the individual. Instead of lumping people into buckets, treatment A versus treatment B, well, we'll go with A over B. It'll be on the individual basis, saying, based on all of your clinical information, your genetics, your individual history, and your course of disease, what makes sense for you on a very granular level of detail. And tumor boards are a great source of data for doing exactly that. By nature, they're multidisciplinary. They have not just natural language, but they have imaging modalities. They have tissue, histopathology, genetics, and multi-omics data. Everything goes in, all these different data streams flow through this meeting. And you're also able to listen to how clinicians think. They discuss why they're making certain decisions, why they think one idea versus the other, and they walk you through the process of how they're thinking about something and why they want to make a certain decision for a given patient. All that information over time for the various cancer patients that are discussed and treated over the years can be used as a data set for creating basically super intelligent AI for cancer care. And so that's what we're most excited about, is capturing all this knowledge, all this expertise, using it to train AI so that anybody can have access to this intelligence and this expertise for treating their loved ones. It doesn't matter if you're at Mayo Clinic or if you're in, a rural clinic in Zimbabwe. Everybody who has internet access will have access to the same level of expertise.
What kind of feedback have you received from physicians or health systems so far, and how has that shaped kind of the product direction?
I mean, they're excited about this idea simply because of the pain point that they're experiencing. The workflow automation piece is enough to get clinicians on board, and then you share with them, by the way, this is what we're hoping to do in the long term. It just makes them more excited. And so we've gotten pretty positive reactions from everybody that we've spoken with so far. Nobody's been against it. I'll say that. There's varying levels of, yes, we definitely want this, take my money right now, versus, oh yeah, I could see that being a really good idea. But nobody's said that it's a bad idea. Everybody's been for it.
We know, in some of my research around all this, one of the things that kept coming up was explainability of the model. And I'm sure you've had some challenges around that. So how are you thinking about explainability in the model, especially when patients or providers might rely on the outputs for high stakes decisions?
Yeah, there's a few different ways that you can do it. The first is with RAG, like you mentioned, retrieval augmented generation. If you anchor every statement or every output of the AI in some sort of source that with a clickable link that justifies why it said that helps add some trust. So that's one way to increase transparency into what the model's thinking, adding these references for every single sentence. The other way to increase the explainability comes back to this idea of symbolic language, basically creating like a giant knowledge graph where you can trace the lines of reasoning from one concept to another through these graph structures. That is going to be important for us for building clinical decision support systems. It's less of a black box, but it's actually something where you can follow quite literally the reasoning chain through the graph and follow how it was connecting different concepts and why it was thinking in certain ways.
As you've gone through this process and you've built Galen, what trade-offs have you had to make between like technical ambition and real-world clinical usability, if any?
Yeah. So we actually started with a different idea. Like I mentioned, we wanted to do early detection at first. And early detection of these deadly cancers is obviously a great idea. It'd be very useful to do so. But when you try to talk to hospitals about who should pay it, or who pays for it, or how do we make this feasible, or how do we increase the trust of these systems, it's not as viable. And so that was a trade-off for us, was having to give up on this idea of early detection for something that is an alternate path to the same goal of doing good for these cancer patients.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, my role or the startup that I'm trying to get going is this fractional CIO or CISO type role. Where could something like that support you guys to help you accelerate what you're trying to do, if at all? I mean, there may be no opportunity, but would it be like setting up data pipelines, governance frameworks, scaling the infrastructure? I'm just curious, trying to figure out how to grow my own business.
Yeah, I think that. So this isn't me speaking from experience. This is something that I anticipate. I think the idea of fractional executives is going to be very important for growing startups. Once a startup starts seeing a little bit of success and they start hiring for the first time, they'll get to a certain critical mass of maybe like 10 employees where they need to start thinking about, okay, how do we really scale things? It's less of a move fast and break things environment, and it's more of, okay, how do we systematize everything? How do we go from being a small scrappy startup to a reproducible engine that drives forward? And that's when you start thinking about these executive roles or these leadership roles. But it's also not at a point where they can probably afford to pay like a full-time executive. And so that's like the sweet spot, in my opinion, for these fractional executives, like fractional CIOs, fractional CFO, and so on. So growing startups where they've had that initial traction, that initial signs of success, and they're starting to grow is where I think a fractional CIO would be important.
Well, I also think that there's an opportunity to increase valuation down the road by putting some of those best practices in place and compliance related things in place up front. So.
Yeah, and frankly, even having you on board. I mean, the fact that you're somebody that's been there, done that, and you're speaking from experience, that's going to increase the confidence of investors as well when it comes time to do like a Series A round or a Series B round.
Agree with you. Absolutely. Well, can you tell us a little bit about some of your near-term product priorities? What are you guys looking to do next?
Yeah, so we're deploying our first generation of this platform with the Mayo Clinic right now, and they are a design collaborator with us to iterate on this product, improve it, and then later on this year we'll be approaching academic medical centers across the country to get our first external clinical pilots, start getting this in the hands of diverse users and getting feedback to continue improving. So we're at the deployment phase, and then we're going to be growing here pretty soon, starting probably Q4 this year.
So your focus to this point, from what you've mentioned, has been around the tumor and cancer side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have other diseases or conditions that you guys are thinking about in the next 12 to 18 months, or are you just going to focus on that for now?
For right now, just cancer. It's going to be enough to keep us occupied. I'll say that. So cancer is incredibly complex and diverse in itself, and so if we try to expand beyond cancer right now, I expect that we won't be able to do it as well as it demands. And so we're going to focus only on cancer care, only on these tumor board meetings for the foreseeable future.
What internal constraints are you seeing right now within your team? Is it talent, compliance, funding? What's holding you guys back right now, if anything?
Let's see. Right now we're in a fundraising phase, so I think funding is probably top of mind. So that's always something that starts thinking about is the funding aspect. And then after that is distribution. So trying to get in contact with as many potential users as possible, talk with them about what they want from a product like this, and so on.
As you continue to build AI agents for rare diseases and cancer care, where do you see the greatest need for support? Integrating with clinical systems, scaling your biomedical knowledge base, strengthening infrastructure, or regulatory readiness?
I think the hardest part, like the most difficult aspect of growing a company in the healthcare space, is simply the timelines involved with working with healthcare systems. It's a very long process to go through a sales cycle and to get to enter into an agreement with an academic medical center, for example. And it's long enough that for many startups, that alone deters people from innovating in the space. And so I think one of the challenges that I would like to see addressed, or at least I would like to see change for others in the future, is how long it takes to get innovative ideas, these innovators, into the healthcare system, to let them try to improve patient care and to improve the systems that so desperately need it.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot here with a couple questions.
Sure.
If Galen Health achieves everything you envision, how will the healthcare experience be different for patients 5 years from now?
5 years from now might be optimistic, but let's say a decade from now. If we achieved everything that we wanted to, you'd have everybody who has a smartphone would have access to world-class expertise for cancer care. And that would cut out a lot of the middleman, a lot of these frustrations that people have with the cancer experience, which is frankly traumatic, would be constantly available to them. They'd have somebody to walk them through the experience. They'd have answers to a lot of the doubts and the anxieties that are part of the diagnostic journey for cancer, and hopefully contributing to cures for some diseases. So we'll see what happens, but I'm optimistic that AI is going to make a huge impact for cancer care.
I think it is too. I think it's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah.
What's a book or framework or idea outside of medicine or AI that's influenced how you've approached building Galen?
I would say two of them. One of them is more, there's two resources that I would highly recommend. One is for business, and then the other is for just a scientific framework. So, for a way of looking at the world. So the first one for business is this podcast from Naval Ravikant. It's called How to Get Rich. And it's kind of a clickbaity title, but it's basically a 3-hour podcast that is just very dense with information and insights about not just building a business, but how to provide value to the world and how to create wealth that just uplifts the entire environment around you. It's it's influenced my life quite a bit, and there's a lot of great philosophy mixed in there. So I would recommend that. And then the book that I would recommend is called Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. David Deutsch is a physicist and basically the father of quantum computing, if you're interested in that sort of thing. But it lays out this framework for looking at reality and how these different ideas sort of form this crystalline structure through which you can view the world. It's like a very sturdy scaffolding about how to think about big ideas, philosophy, how to frame different aspects of your life, and it really had an impact on me. So I would recommend that book.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Logan, thank you for sharing your journey and thoughtful approach that you're bringing to medical AI. Your vision to empower physicians and patients with trustworthy, accessible insights is truly inspiring. For our listeners, where can they learn more about Galen Health or connect with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Logan Nye, MD. You can find us online at www.galenhealth.org. Or you can just send me an email. My email is logan@galenhealth.org. We'd love to talk to you.
Perfect. And to our audience, if this episode got you thinking about scaling AI-driven healthcare, governance, or data readiness, let's connect. Visit Pertelligent.com or reach out via LinkedIn. Until next time, question more, build smarter, and stay on the edge of intelligence.